Hello and welcome back to my channel. We are talking about patches again today. Been on a patch kick recently and I wanted to share my process on this big patch I was working on. So I was commissioned by a local artist to make this patch. It's actually a large patch, the largest I'd made, 11 inches by 12 inches. So it is a pretty big patch, and one thing I was worried about was this is going to take forever because it's going to be a lot of stitches. So what I decided to do was use the applique method here to help reduce stitch count and make the whole process faster. So here on screen we have the design I did, and just to show you the original art, this is original art. It was a relatively easy design to digitize. It's just a bunch of tatami fills and satin stitches. So this is what I came up with here. Now currently this design is, if you look in the bottom right, it's just under 90,000 stitches. And this is after I've gone in and lowered all the stitch density because I know we're going to be doing applique. If you're not familiar with applique, applique is a embroidery technique where you place fabric down, do a tack down stitch, and then the embroidery thread runs on top of it, or it can be left as an outline to show the fabric through. I like to use applique to reduce stitch count. I know I've mentioned this briefly in a few of my other videos, but I wanted to actually illustrate how I go about using that. But first, let's talk about what would have happened if I didn't use applique. So digitizing this was no problem. If we look here at my fills, so all of my tatami fills have the same property. So if I just click on one here, this outer edge, look on the right hand side. I'm using 1.2 millimeter fill. The default is 0.40, so I've actually lightened this up quite a bit. And I have my underlays turned off. Let me just switch this back to the default full fill and we can see the difference that makes. So again, at the bottom right, we can see we are about 90,000 stitches. I'm going to switch this to 0.40 millimeters since that's the default. And then I'm going to add a underlay. So now if we look back down here in the bottom right, we jumped up to 100,000 stitches. So just that change, and it's just for this one area, it increased 10,000 stitches. Imagine if I had left the full density fill on all of these big areas. When I originally did it, I think it was at 160, 170,000 stitches. So after I digitized everything, I went through and updated all my fills to this 1.2 millimeter density, and it ended up cutting down about 80,000 stitches. So for me, that's a great thing because that's 80,000 stitches less. I'm having to use my machine and I'm able to run this project a lot faster. But now let's take a look at how you would go about actually digitizing a design if you're going to be using the applique method. The first thing I like to do is just digitize your design as normal. For me, it was just placing these fills and doing the satin stitch. And then when I was done, if we look here on the right hand side where we have my objects, the orange and the blue outlines are what the extra step I added in order to do applique method. So when this is stitching out, the first step here is to make my outline stitch. And in this design, I use 3 different colors of fabric. I take away the stitches. We can see the design is mainly this dark red color. And then in the head, I used dark brown fabric. And then this shirt here, I used a light pink. So 3 kinds of fabrics. So this first stitch that you're seeing here in the orange is just an outline of the entire area. Once that stitch is out, my machine stops. I'll place down a big piece of red fabric. And then this blue right here is going to be the tack down stitch. Once that's finished, we stop and then I'll cut away the excess fabric. And then it's going to repeat that process for the brown and the pink and then finish sewing out the design as normal. So very minimal effort in digitizing when you're doing applique. You're just making a couple extra outlines and then you're making note of where the machine stops before you place it down. And I'll show you how this actually worked out in real time. But before we jump to the actual machine, just to show you the difference applique makes. So right now I have the artwork in the back, so it looks like full fill. If I remove the artwork, and just to take off the hoop here, you can see the gray background really shines through. That's because this is light density fill. So if we're not using applique and we're just doing a bunch of light density fills, it's not really going to work because you're going to see that contrasting fabric show through. But when you have the matching fabric underneath, to the eye, you can't even tell, and it looks like a full density fill. So you're saving stitches, saving time, everybody wins. So now let's move over and show you some samples I ran and then how this actually stitches out in real life. So what I did was I just made these little squares in the same fill that I would be using on the patch, so 1.2 millimeters, no underlay. And then I placed the fabric underneath to see how it would blend in. So for this patch, I'm actually using 3 shades of red. You can't really tell on the camera, but they do vary slightly, and I wanted to make sure they would look okay. And then the other colors I'm using are pink, this dark purple, and then 2 shades of brown. So all the colors blended in nicely, and from a distance, they look like full fill. When we come up closer, then you can actually see the fabric underneath. So these were the fabrics I bought. These are just really cheap quilting cotton. When you're doing applique, you don't need anything fancy. This is a nice thin material, so it's not going to bulk up the patches. It costs like $6 for a quarter yard each of all of these, so very reasonable. When I was doing this test, I wasn't happy with how the purple looked. In the picture, it kind of looks more like a grayish purple, and I didn't have that exact color to match. I was playing around, and this is actually the same color thread here. It's like a dark purple, but this one has the pink underneath, and you can see it completely changes the color. If you hold these two up next to each other, same exact thread, but when you put it on different base fabrics, you can actually make a new color. So it's kind of like magic here, but this is actually the color I wanted. So it worked out great. If I hadn't done this test before, my colors would have been incorrect. And then this is just a test I did of the wording because it was a pretty large satin stitch. I just wanted to make sure it would look okay. So when possible, always test. Now let's grab our hoop and fabric and get the process started. So I have my hoop set up here, and I've already done the first step of the basting stitch that has the outline place. I'm not sure you can really see it, but I did a red outline stitch of the entire shape of the patch. I'm also using 2 sheets of heavy tearaway stabilizer. I have that hooped. Now that we have the outline stitch placed, I have this pre-cut piece of red fabric, and just make sure that the fabric is a little bigger than the outline here. And then I'm going to place it on top. Now we're going to go back to the machine, and it's going to stitch the outline again, and we'll bring it back here and cut off the excess fabric. So the first outline has finished stitching. So we can see the main outline of the patch here. And I also did this outline inside because remember, we're going to have this is the head piece. It's going to be dark brown. And then the body here is going to be in the light pink. So I also need to cut out this inner piece because we're placing fabric on there as well. And then this outer piece. This is my least favorite part of the applique method. It's why I don't do it a lot. Gotta have some good cutting skills here. So you're going to want to be using small scissors. They do make curved scissors for applique, which makes it a little easier. I don't know where mine are, so I'm going to be using these. But now let's get to the dirty work. Okay, there we go. 1 applique down, 2 more to go. You just clean it up to give us a little fuzzy pieces up. And the next part of this design is going to be stitching out the head. That's going to be in dark brown. So I have this little piece here, just placing it to make sure it covers. And now we'll take this back to the machine do another tack down stitch and cut around the fabric. And there is the headpiece. So coming along. Next, before I do the applique for the body part, I'm going to actually have the head stitch out. So we're going to stitch these all out in dark brown. And then after that's done, we'll come lay pink fabric for the body and do that. So the brown part has finished stitching out and it looks nice. You can't even see any fabric through, but it looks like full coverage stitching, which gives it a nice effect. So we saved on a bunch of stitches there. So I'm really excited how the rest of this will turn out. So lastly, for the applique, I have this pink fabric for the body part. Gonna stitch out the outline, then we'll cut off the excess, and then we can let the patch finish stitching out and we'll see what the end result looks like. And here we have the finished product. So I think this turned out amazing, exactly what I wanted. Once we put down the black satin stitch here, it covered up all the raw edges from the applique fabric. So now looking at it, you can't even tell the fabric underneath unless you knew what was going on in the background. So just taking a closer look here, you can see how that light density fill really makes it look like full coverage when it's put up against the same color fabric as the thread. I was also worried around here that the satin stitches would be too big. I think they were about 11 millimeters, which is pushing it on how wide a satin stitch should be, but it actually came out fine. So yeah, overall, I am very pleased. I think my client will absolutely love this. This is probably the biggest patch I have done, about 80,000 stitches, and it would have been 160,000 had I not used our little applique light density fill trick. Yeah, that's all there is to it. I hope you found this helpful. If this is a technique you've used or would like to use, definitely let me know how it goes. All that's left to do is cut this out and get it shipped off to my client. Thanks, y'all.